welcome back and thank you for joining me. Today is International Holocaust Memorial Day. 27th of January was chosen to commemorate the day when the Auschwitz concentration camp was liberated by the Red Army in 1945. The day remembers the killing of 6 million Jews, two-thirds of Europe's Jewish population, and millions of others by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. It was designated by the United Nations General Assembly. Some different countries, other countries might have different days, as indeed Israel does. But Britain's International Holocaust Memorial Day falls on the 27th of January. And I guess because of my age and because I went to school and at a time when it was very much taught in schools, we visited some of the sites of the concentration camps. I vividly remember as a young person staying in Sachsenhausen, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous place, which is, oh, unless you've been there, it's so beautiful and such evil took place there. Now, there are still Holocaust deniers. Yesterday, the headline, a French Holocaust denier was found in Fife, hiding out in Fife. He's somebody who's put out, Vincent Reynaud has been putting out videos denying the Holocaust. There are still Holocaust survivors. So if you're asking why on earth we need an International Holocaust Memorial Day, anti-Semitism has been on the rise. And joining me now is Marc Cave, who's the director of the Holocaust Museum. Marc, thank you so much for your time. As I said right at the beginning, I was like, people still deny it, and yet there's a story. There's a French Holocaust denier hiding out in Fife who's going to be extradited back to France, where Holocaust denial is a crime. So it's still going on, isn't it?
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Trisha. It is, but I wouldn't want to dignify cranks like that too much. There are bigger problems associated with the Holocaust today, actually.
Yeah. And let's talk about, you've got a couple of images here that we want to show, that I know you want to talk about. If we can put those up on the screen, we'll see them in just a minute. There they are. Where are these from? One obviously looks like it's from one of the marches that have been taking place around the country in the UK, and the other one. Let's just talk us through. These are from the National Holocaust Centre. Talk to us about them.
Of course, of course. So I think it's a terribly sad day because we're commemorating something truly horrific. And what doubles the agony is that not only has humanity not learnt from it, because there's been umpteen genocides since, but the things which caused this specific genocide are back big time in a way that I frankly can't believe, even in England and around the world. But the real shock is that the hate, the anti-Jewish hate, the naked racism, frankly, of it, is now owned by a completely new group of people. It is not any longer the home of home housed by the far right and fascist leaders. It's on the left, and it's amongst Islamists. How can this be? And this will absolutely lead to another Jewish genocide if we're not careful. So
I was going to ask, do you think it's a lack of education? Because I mentioned, when I was at school, which is all right, I started high school in 1969. It wasn't so long, I guess, since the end of the war, really. I was born in 1957, which wasn't. So, we visited, as I mentioned there in the introduction, we actually visited places like Auschwitz and, Sachsenhausen. So we knew, we heard about the horrors in the actual place, and it's indelible. That kind of education, does it still exist anymore?
Oh yeah, it exists big time. Lots of the peers in our sector, if I can call it that, do as we do, some very powerful programs. We take people to these places. There's plenty of education. I think the problem is that it's slightly more insidious than that. Those facts that they are given are almost deliberately hijacked in the support of a new, untruthful agenda. If you are troubled by the world, if you're troubled by Western values, capitalism, um, colonialism, I loathe to use the word, but it is used by the people I'm talking about, elitism, then almost by definition today, you are anti-Jewish. Because the people I'm talking about believe that Jews typify those characteristics. That's why it's racism, by the way. It's not just it's nothing to do with religion. And that used to be the province of the far right and of fascists. But today, it is in the hearts and minds of people who are pro-human rights, pro-social justice, who are therefore, literally, therefore, by definition, anti-Jewish. It is racism of the most astonishing type.
How do you separate the two? Because I'm thinking right back to when we do our faith panel, we talk about the biblical times. Even then, there was that association with the, I'm thinking the money lenders in the church. It goes back centuries. How do you separate the two? I mean, how has this become enmeshed? How have the two things become enmeshed?
Because I think history kind of shows that whenever times get bad, people look for a scapegoat. And because Jews, since being kicked out of their own country by the Romans 2,000 years ago, sought refuge in countries all over Europe, and by trying to successfully integrate, they preserved their own sense of Jewish identity alongside the identity of the home they're in. So I'm Jewish and English in equal measure, and I have no problem with that duality, but people often have. So I think the othering of Jewish communities within national populations is the same today as it always has been. It's just now being used by different people for different reasons. It is now about rejecting Western capitalism, Western elitism, etc., etc. The white man's colonialism, and for some crazy reason, Jews are responsible for all of this. It is a monomania. If you divert your entire life as leftists like Corbyn and Chris Williamson do, and I'm worried that Keir Starmer isn't going to do enough about it because I'm sure he's going to be the next boss of the country. We've got a real problem because it's supposedly in the service of freedom and democracy and human rights, and actually it's quite the reverse. It's bullying, it's persecution, it's blaming one very specific group of people for all the problems of the world. I agree with some of their diagnosis of the West's problems. I'm just not sure I'd blame Jews for them.
Now, do you think that it's always been there, but because of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening between Gaza and Israel, it's almost given people license to come out and speak it out loud, but it's always kind of been bubbling under the surface anyway?
That's absolutely right. I think you put your finger on it, Trisha. Absolutely bang on. Yeah, and it only takes, let's look at it. 2008, the financial system collapses. Then we have Brexit, and we have COVID, and we have austerity, and we have recession and war, and life's not great. So people need certainty when the chips are down. So when you're looking for certainty, why not adopt a conspiracy theory? It's the Jews what did it. It's the Jews what impregnated the COVID vaccine with a digital chip. People think that
really?
Bill Gates is Jewish. Yeah, well, 1 in 5 people in this country, one of your sister organisations, The Times, did a survey in May after COVID broke out of what people thought attributed COVID to. 1 in 5 Britons said that Jews caused it for financial gain.
What?
It's a conspiracy theory. I mean, these things don't change. What I think we've got to do in terms of Holocaust education is understand why people say what they say. There's no point just moaning about the what of what they do. People are going to complain. People are going to, launch vile accusations, whether it's against the Jewish state or the Jewish people or anybody else. Why? Why don't, instead of the ICJ putting the Jewish state in the dock, why don't we put the racists in the dock? Why don't we say, why is it you devote your entire life to demonizing Jews? There are plenty of other people.
Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is? And historically, as we mentioned before, it's sort of gone in waves, but it's kind of always been there.
Yeah.
But why? What is it? Is it because they're an easy target? Is it because they're seen to, or people think of them as sticking together. So there's got to be, some cabal, because that's the other one, isn't it?
That is, yes, yes, yes. I mean, yeah, yeah. It's simply that. I think it harks back slightly to what I was saying a couple of minutes ago about if Jewish people make an attempt to integrate into a society, take this country. And Jews have been here since 1066. They're expelled and then were allowed back in. But Jewish people on the whole in this country have led peaceful, successful lives, being both British and Jewish. In times of trouble, that unnerves people because it's like, well, if you speak English and you look English, but you're Jewish, then how English can you really be? Now, in the 1980s, that would have been the National Front saying it about black people or Asian people. I remember Norbin Tebbit saying when it is England versus Pakistan in the Test cricket, I wonder which side the British Muslims are going to support. People don't like nuance. They don't like duality and plurality of identity. But this is a really great one. It's a fantastic story. There's this, they're a tiny group of people. We can't identify them visibly because they haven't got a different skin colour. But they're very rich and they're very clever, and they kill Jesus, and they drink children's blood. It's a great story. So
Do you think it's different in the States? Do you think because I mean, from living here and living in the UK, I think, and I'm generalizing here, but American Jewish people see, I think, the British as far more integrated. Well, they had to be after the war. And we forget that Britain only took the kinder transport because they weren't taking the adults. So, Britain doesn't, they don't escape all blame. But do you think there's a difference between the Jewish population in the States and, say, in the UK?
yeah, I mean, yes and no. There are obvious differences, but I think it's a distraction from the main issue because we're seeing in America today, which is dominated by leftist discourse amongst the kind of the chattering classes, the opinion forming classes, most notably on university campuses, for the presidents of Ivy League colleges to say that genocide of Jews is okay depending on the context is mind-boggling. So that kind of says that America is not quite as safe a place for Jews as perhaps it once was. So I think this is more about a global thing. It's no longer about borders. It's about a global movement for social justice, for human rights, and we're all for that, right? But somehow there needs to be a villain that people can easily point to, and that's why a new bunch of people are blaming Jews for it. I mean, I think the whole Islamist piece of this, there's a kind of like an Islamist leftist alliance, if I can call it that. I think the issues in that faction are more easy to understand and identify. No more acceptable. But it's a form of monomania.
It's what you can't see. Let's talk about just to finish up the internet and what that, because again we've talked about historically, at least before it was word of mouth. Now you have the internet, you have social media, you have all of those things to incorporate at the Holocaust Museum. I mean, I had a quick look at your website, and I think it's great how you've harnessed social media, certain areas to speak to certain audiences. But that's made your work far more difficult, hasn't it?
It's made the world more difficult. It's destroyed the truth. No one cares about the truth. They only care about their truth, and that's because of social media. So I would say that God forbid there is another genocide of any real genocide, not trumped up charges of against any people. The dictator that mobilizes the shock troops will be the algorithm. We are all groupthink is dead of that,
The echo chamber.
Yes.
So what can you do? I mean, what is just again before we finish, what is the Holocaust Museum doing? I mean, I've touched upon some of the things you do. There's some great stuff on the website. I would recommend people have a look at that. But just give us a quick roundup of what sort of things, if they want to come along to the Holocaust Museum, how they can educate themselves.
I think the theme that runs through our exhibitions, our touring exhibitions, our memorial gardens, is we don't want to tell you that you are wrong or stupid. People aren't stupid. We just want you to think again, question your own assumptions. If you can leave our museum actually knowing less, being certain of less, that would be great. So the pictures that you flashed up on the screen before are a perfect example of that. When you see people on a freedom march, ostensibly saying attractive things like, you know, freeing Palestine, if we can just show you where the visual language comes from, so Israel's prime minister is vilified as a child killer, as a vampire who likes eating babies for their blood. You don't see that meme applied to Putin or to any other warmonger or leader. What we're trying to do is lift the lid. If you could actually lift that picture up, you would see what's behind it, which is the other picture that you had on that image, which is the very same image in 1936 on the front cover of Der Stürmer magazine. Now, what that does is leads people to a conversation about, oh, that's interesting. I thought it was just about Israel Hamas. It's not. It's the continuation of an old theme, and that takes you to a very different place.
Thank you so much for joining us. We've run completely out of time. Marc Cave there, Director of the Holocaust Museum. Big thanks to the team.